Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Brittany, and I'm an educator at the St. Louis Zoo. Welcome to our webinar, Radical Reptiles. I'm going to be sharing my screen on and off through this webinar, so you might see me get a little bit closer. I do have to kind of click around a little bit with my mouse. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And we're going to go over some of the features of today's webinar, as well as some of our community learning standards. All right. So before we get started, go ahead and if you have not opened up our Zoom webinar chat box, go ahead and locate that. And let me know where you're zooming in from today and maybe how many people are with you. You're going to see another box that says Q&A. That stands for questions and answers. If you'd like to submit any questions to me throughout the webinar, please do so. Just know that I won't be getting to those questions until towards the end of our webinar. And we do have a tech person. Her name is Kim, and Kim is going to be our behind the scenes helper, and she'll help me monitor the chat today because I won't always be able to see what you guys are writing in. At the end, we'll also have a quick enjoyment poll, and we thank you for your feedback. Now, some of our community learning standards. We want to make sure that we're friendly and respectful to one another at all times in the chat box. Use the Q&A for relevant and appropriate questions. I look forward to seeing the questions that you have on our topic of reptiles today. We want to use the chat box to respond and interact in regards to the webinar topic as well. That way, when I do look, I know kind of what our conversation's going to look like, and I can help with answering any questions that might pop up there too. And also understand that if Kim notices a behavior that needs to change in the chat box, she will gently remind you to do so. And if you do not alter that behavior, you may be removed from this webinar. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So radical reptiles, one of my absolute favorite topics to teach about, and I'm sure that many of you really like reptiles too. Now, Kim is going to be pulling up a poll. I'm curious to know how comfortable you are with reptiles right now. Is it very comfortable? They're my favorite animals to visit at the zoo. Comfortable, I enjoy learning about them. Unsure, I respect them but don't want to be near them, or not comfortable at all. Go ahead and post your thoughts there. And we'll give you about 5 more seconds. All right, Kim, if you can close the poll, thank you so much. Awesome. I like to know where everybody's comfort level is when we start. Now, for radical reptiles, scientists classify animals. There's so many different species. They classify animals into different groups based on their characteristics or features. So for today, we're going to be focusing just on the reptile group. Now, there are over 7,700 species of reptiles, and I surely don't have enough time to go through every single one of them with you today. So we're just going to go over those basic characteristics that make a reptile a reptile. I'm going to spotlight some of our zoo reptiles that you've probably seen if you visit the herpetarium, as well as we have a very special surprise guest that we'll be meeting towards the end of the webinar today. I'm very, very excited about this. Keep your eye out for some clues that might pop up as we discuss that too. All right, so we're gonna get started with talking about the many different groups of reptiles. So even though it's a reptile group, we can break it down even further. So we can think about reptiles as 6 main kind of facets or groups within there. We have our snakes, lizards, turtles, tortoises, alligators, and crocodiles. Whew, so many, and they're so diverse. Now, they do have a lot of features in common as well as some differences. And I'm curious to know what your favorite reptile is. So what reptile do you find maybe most interesting or has been your favorite for a while? Go ahead and type it into the chat box. And I have the chat box open so I can actually see what you're typing. I see someone says a turtle. Snake. Oh, someone actually saw a turtle the other day. Awesome. Bearded dragon. Lots of turtles, lots of lizards, lots of snakes. Ooh, giant tortoises. Oh, wow, they're really flying in now. Green anaconda. Wonderful. Oh, awesome. So awesome to see. Now, I'm going to share my favorite reptile with you guys, too. My favorite reptile is actually the eastern copperhead. This is a snake that you can commonly find in Illinois and Missouri. I say common and you can find them, but it's actually very tricky. These are two that I've found while hiking, and I've definitely kept my distance. I always like to give animals their space. I just have a really good zoom on my phone, luckily. And I always think it's it's like when you find a four-leaf clover. When I find a copperhead, I think that that's a very lucky day for me. They blend in with those leaves so well. So we're gonna go ahead now and focus on the features that makes our reptiles and our favorite reptiles a reptile. Starting with, oh, I think it went too fast. Maybe no. Well, we'll just go ahead and highlight a snake now. It looks like maybe one of my slides disappeared, and that happens from time to time. So we're gonna go ahead and highlight one of my favorite zoo reptiles. And if you know this reptile, if you've seen the green anaconda, go ahead and type it into the chat. Who knows the green anaconda from the zoo? Her name is actually J-Lo. And oh, awesome, a lot of you have seen her. Perfect. So J-Lo is our first reptile spotlight. Now, this is a species that you'll find in South America. And as you can tell, she is a big fan of the water. She is an excellent swimmer and very, very strong. She's around 20 to 25 years old. She's about 18 feet long. Now, anacondas can reach over 20 feet, but just because they can reach that length doesn't mean that they all do, just like some people are taller than others. She weighs about 175 pounds as well. So she's a very large snake. Now, something that all reptiles have in common is a backbone. And so any animal with a backbone we call a vertebrate. Now, I have some biofacts over here behind me. I always let my participants know that at the St. Louis Zoo, we love animal friends. We would never hurt any animal to get any items that I share with you today. We use these items just as scientists would to make observations and learn more about our animal friends. So I have a skeleton of a snake here. And what I think is really interesting, I sometimes get asked, Miss Brittany, do snakes actually have bones? They do. They actually have a very long backbone as well. You can see that it kind of does this little zigzag swiggle. So from their skull to the tip of their tail is a very long backbone, and you can also see that there are some ribs too. Sounds a little bit familiar to us, right? We also have ribs, just not as many. So our first feature, all reptiles are vertebrates with a backbone. And we have our first clue. So this clue is going to help us as we get closer to our meeting our surprise guest. You can write these clues down or just remember them in your head. The surprise guest has 4 legs. Well, that helps us a little bit to identify with what reptile it could possibly be, but I think we might need more clues. So let's keep going. To be a reptile, you're also going to be cold-blooded. Now, it can be a little difficult to explain cold-blooded, so I actually made this diagram to help us out with that. So this is a broad-headed skink. This is actually one I saw over the weekend hiking, and he was sunning himself on a log. And when a cold-blooded animal, when a reptile is out with, oh, let's see, you're still sharing your screen. Oh, Isabel, I'm not sure. It should move back. I just saw that message. Hopefully the screen will move back and you're able to see this diagram. So the cold-blooded animals, when they're in the sun or it's a little bit warmer outside, their body temperature will increase. Now, if they move to an area, maybe it's cloudy or shady, they go underground, their body temperature will decrease. So based on what's happening around them, their body temperature will also change. The opposite is warm-blooded. A warm-blooded animal, the body temperature, the internal body temperature stays the same no matter if it's really warm or really cold outside. So our reptile friends, I always think about their body temperature goes on a roller coaster. It has ups and downs depending on what's happening in the surroundings around them. All right. And another reptile spotlight, this is another favorite, is Norm, the American alligator. And we have one American alligator, so if you remember seeing him, then you have seen Norm. A lot of times he'll be found in his pool. That's a great way for animals to cool off. And Norm is not quite as long as J-Lo. Remember, J-Lo was 18 feet. Norm is only 13 feet. I say only, but that's still very long. You can imagine two adults, maybe one standing on the other one's shoulders, and that's maybe close to the length of Norm. He weighs between 300 and 350, or 300 and 335 pounds, not quite 350. So he has a little bit of a range, just like sometimes our weight will fluctuate too. And Norm first came to the zoo in 1961. He's been at the zoo since 1961, so he's about 69 years old, which is amazing because American alligators in the wild usually live to be around 50, and he is still in tip-top shape. So that is our reptile spotlight with Norm. Now, something that you'll probably notice with him is what's covering his body. But first, we have another clue. Our surprise guest has slightly webbed feet and sharp claws. 4 legs, webbed feet, sharp claws. Okay. I have some ideas, I have some thoughts, and I'm sure that you guys do too. Hold on to them because we still have some more features to talk about. Thinking about their bodies now, what's covering our reptiles' bodies. They all have scales, no matter if they are a turtle or a lizard or a snake or a crocodile. And the scales can be different colors, shapes, they can feel different. Some are more spiky, some are rough, some are smooth. I have some items I'd like to share with you guys today. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. There it is. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can see this a little bit better. So I have some alligator skin here. Now what's interesting is the scales are not the same. On the underside is a little bit more flat, and on the back you'll see that it actually raises up. There's like little bumps. The scales are also pretty large. Another example I'd like to share with you today is a timber rattlesnake shed. Now a shed from a snake is just their old skin, and they actually grow new scales underneath. A lot of times young snakes, when they're growing, they shed a little bit more often, and also just to replace scales. So we laminated this because sheds are rather fragile, rather delicate. But what's interesting, again, the underside of our snake, the scale shape is different than the top. So the scales look different. The shape of the underside, the belly, those scales really help to grip the ground or trees and help them to move around because snakes don't have arms or legs. So scales do more than just protect. They can have camouflage capabilities. They can stand out if they're brightly colored or help with movement. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again because we have another reptile highlight. Now, this one here, I know many of you mentioned liking tortoises. This is Kelly, our Galapagos tortoise. And Galapagos tortoises are actually the largest living tortoise species in the world. So it's really awesome that we have her at the St. Louis Zoo. She is about 30 years old, and that's quite young for this tortoise because they can live to be over 100 years. She weighs 261 pounds, And I know what you're thinking, man, to carry such a heavy shell on your back, like that's gotta be hard, right? Imagine carrying like a really, really heavy backpack all the time, only that backpack is your body. Now with these tortoises, the bones of the shell actually have a honeycomb structure. So think about a bee's honeycomb. And that structure actually helps to make the shell a little bit lighter and it's easier to move. Awesome. Oh, I see a lot of you are really excited. Yes, she's eating some oranges. They like to eat fruits and vegetables. They actually just posted a video of the tortoises. So if you're curious to see, there are some videos of them posted on our social media. So definitely check those out. Now, another thing, if you're a reptile, another feature, after our clue, of course, we have another clue. Awesome. Let's see. The surprise guest is native to West Africa. Okay, so we have sharp claws, webbed toes, native to West Africa, 4 legs. There are still so many reptiles it could be. I think we're gonna have to keep moving. We just need another clue. We're gonna talk about the reptile's life cycle now. If you're a reptile, you more than likely hatched from an egg, and the egg is laid on land, as most reptiles do. And you have a simple life cycle. Now, a simple life cycle has 2 steps. You are born, then you get bigger. This is an example. It's a McCord's box turtle. It's one that hatched at the St. Louis Zoo. And when you look at the turtle compared to the adult, you can tell it's going to be a turtle. It's not hatching from the egg, and it doesn't look like an alligator, and it doesn't look like a snake. So simple life cycles, you can tell what the animal is going to be. Even if the colors change a little bit, this turtle is not going to grow a shell. It already has its shell on its back, and it's not going to grow, another leg. It already has its 4 legs. So again, just a very simple life cycle. And even our aquatic species, like our sea turtles, will come onto land to lay their eggs in a nest. All right, guys, we have another clue. This is getting really exciting. That means we're getting closer to meeting our guest. The surprise guest lives in waterways, including swamps, ponds, lakes, and lagoons. These are all really interesting clues. So keep those in mind as we get closer to meeting our guest today. Let's talk about some backyard reptiles. I saw in our chat, a few of you mentioned seeing turtles, maybe finding a snake. Now these are just some photos of animals that I have seen of reptiles when I've been hiking or even just out gardening. So there are so many different types. Now, it can be difficult to know all of the types of species out there. I still struggle with some of them too. I don't know all of the different animals in the world. I am still learning, even after years and years with working at the zoo, which is really exciting for me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share a way that I like to learn more, and that's through identification books, or you can call them field guides. Field guides come in many different styles. So this one is one from Missouri. It's called Show Me Herps. And herps, you can think about the herpetarium. Herps is an abbreviation, or just like a word that we use when we talk about amphibians and reptiles. So we're also talking frogs and toads and salamanders are under the herps too. So with this book in particular, like if we wanted to see, let's say we found something that looks like this. The ID book will give you the name, sometimes the habitat it lives in, even the size. Because there are some species that look very similar to one another, sometimes you even have to get so specific as to how big was it. Another example would be this is with Missouri Department of Conservation. They have a lot of good resources as well for identifying native animals. And with snakes, when you look at their guide, it'll actually show you which part of Missouri you might find them in. And I find these to be really helpful. Also, sometimes if I'm not quite sure, I will double check myself too. It's all part of the learning process. Now we're going to have a poll come up. And I'm curious to know, what types of reptiles have you seen in your backyard or local nature area? Maybe you went on a hike recently. So you can click more than one, and I'm very curious to see what kind of reptiles do you have in your backyard? I'll give you guys 5 more seconds. All right. Oh, so many snakes and turtles and lizards. Yeah, it's a little tricky to find tortoises and alligators around here. We don't really have those species native to us, but you can always come to the zoo when we open back up and visit the herpetarium. Just have your face mask ready, and we really look forward to having you guys back soon. Now, the time has come that everybody has been really excited for and waiting so patiently for. We are going to meet our guest animal. Now, our surprise guest is going to show up on the screen that says Jen Wilkins, so I'm going to stop sharing my video. And here is our surprise guest. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Reggie. Now, Reggie is what's called an African side-neck turtle, sometimes also known as an African mud turtle. He is an aquatic species. Aquatic means that he is dwelling in water. So he prefers a habitat of water. He is adapted for that lifestyle. He's an excellent swimmer. Remember our clue of swamps, ponds, lakes, and lagoons? And in Africa, there are some seasons that are more dry. So there's a wet season and a dry season. Now, during the dry season, when there's not as many waterways, these turtles will actually bury themselves in the mud, which is why they also get a nickname of a mud turtle. They're a pretty active species. They like fresh water, so no salt water. They're also what's known as omnivores. And omnivores eat both meat and plants. So in the wild, they would eat insects, plants, and even fish, which makes sense when you're in the water. They also get their name side-neck turtle because they aren't able to pull their head all the way into their shell. They actually fold their neck to the side and their head kind of tucks in the upper shell edge. They can live to be about 50 years old. And we're not actually sure how old Reggie is because Reggie was actually rescued. You see, sometimes you might come across an animal that you haven't seen before. And if you use a field guide, sometimes it might not even be a native animal. Reggie was found in someone's backyard. So we think that somebody might have released their pet. But knowing that this species is found in West Africa, is a long way from a native habitat and might not survive in Missouri. So Reggie was a rescue, and now he is living a really happy life with Jen. So I'm going to go ahead and start my video. We're about ready to wrap up with this webinar. If you guys want to wish Reggie a happy day. Thank you so much for sharing, Reggie, Jen. All right, so there are many conservation efforts and ways that we can help our reptile friends. One way that the zoo is helping is through a project called Turtle Road Watch. This is a citizen science project. Citizen science means that we can all do a part and help. And if you guys are curious as to how you can become involved with the Citizen Science Project Turtle Road Watch, Kim is going to post a link where you can learn more information. Things that we can do is we can respect nature and an animal's need for space. So if you're in your backyard and you see a reptile or any animal, we want to give them their space because they have a lot of things to do. Animals are very busy, especially right now with our spring season. They're moving around, finding food, finding mates or another species. And so we don't want to get in the way of their schedule. Also, we want to keep our wild animals wild. We don't want to take them home with us. They have everything that they need in their habitat. It's best to leave them be and just make observations. Also, just like when we met Reggie, we don't want to release unwanted pets. We want to keep our habitats as they should be, and we don't want to release animals that could potentially be harmed or may cause harm to an ecosystem. Now we're gonna pull up another poll, and I'm curious to know about your comfort level with reptiles now. We went through so many features, talked about some reptiles, what I like to call our famous reptiles of the herpetarium, or some that really stand out to me. And we got to meet Reggie. So go ahead and share. How comfortable do you feel about reptiles now? I'll give you 5 more seconds. Awesome. Well, it looks like we had an increase up to very comfortable. That makes me really happy to hear. And I appreciate you guys spending some time with me today. We're gonna have one final poll, and that's the enjoyment poll. And I'm gonna start looking at our questions that you guys left for me. So it looks like, what is your favorite reptile to work closely with? The favorite reptile that I work closely with. Well, when I work at the zoo, I do handle what's called ambassador animals. And animal ambassadors are animals that we bring to the classroom that we can share. And I really like working with snakes. Snakes to me sometimes are negatively viewed or maybe seem scary because they're so different. I mean, they don't have arms and legs, and they can climb trees sometimes and swim really well. And I find those adaptations or features to be really fascinating. And I like to introduce friendly snakes and snakes that are trained to come to programs so people can make a connection and maybe feel a little bit more comfortable with that. All right. How often does a snake shed? That can depend on many different factors, on like the size of the snake, the age of the snake. Sometimes when they're growing, they think about like we change our, like as we grow, we get bigger clothes. So like when you're a baby versus when you grow up to an adult. So as they grow, they don't change clothes, they just shed their skin and they have new skin under, new scales. So that can really depend a lot. All right. Are you going to be doing another Zoom class? I will be doing more Zoom classes. Yes, we have me and my team. We have so many different classes coming up and we're always so excited. So do keep tuning in at 10 a.m. We do have our schedule located on the STLZOOM website as well. And I can see we're getting really close on time. Kim's gonna like shut the whole webinar down if I go over. So I'm gonna have to keep pushing on. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody's questions. I read a few more and they're awesome questions. And I really appreciate you taking the time to send some to me today. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna let you guys know that if you want to learn more about reptiles or any of the offerings that we have for education right now, please check out resources at STLZOOM.org. We'll have all of those things listed there. And we appreciate you tuning in and thinking of the zoo as we're all thinking about you guys during this time. And I look forward to Zooming with you all again very soon. Have a beautiful day, guys.